The videos are all down at the bottom of each section. Okay, there's a thing that says section review. The one that says recorded classes on YouTube, basically after I record a class, like this is the one that you watched, and that's the one that you watched with the... No, this is the last one. Is basically they're just going to keep getting added. So I should probably put the date on there too. But that's what that is. So if you missed a class, they're down there. Also, this YouTube Chapter 1 playlist, I just actually opened that up. That's going to have everything, and it's not all there yet, everything I've ever done on Chapter 1. So these classes are actually from last year too, just in case you want to, you're crazy and you want to go and look through a whole bunch of other classes as well. And the only reason I'm trying to do that is I'm trying to make it a playlist that you guys can subscribe to that'll be easier to find on your tablet. Okay, who watched the video or read the article? You guys all read the BIOS article, the confusing BIOS article. We're going to talk about software. Okay, we've already talked about the hardware and those physical components that are needed for a computer to work. But in order for a computer to work, we have both hardware and software. And we're going to talk basically, and I didn't get through the whole thing first block today at all, but we'll see if we can catch up or at least get close to it. We're going to talk about how a computer starts and what the software required is. I'm going to shut that one down. Okay, so when we first turn on a computer, some stuff happens. Okay, and what that stuff is part of the programming. This is power supply, it's plugged in. Is the fan running? Okay, fan's not running. Just because a computer is plugged in doesn't mean anything's happening. And the first thing that happens when we start a computer is we push the power button, which that one's already on, and that one's on too. Anyways, we push the power button and it sends a little signal through the motherboard plug, which is this one right here, to tell it to turn on, okay? So, and what that does is it starts a whole sequence of events that we need to understand a little bit in order to be able to troubleshoot and figure out what's wrong with the PC. So I push the power button, and that sends a signal to the power supply to add power to the PC, okay? Kind of starts the sequence of events. And as soon as that happens, a signal starts to go around the motherboard, and really it turns on the motherboard, which starts a program that we probably have never even really paid attention to before. Okay, so what happens is once this power starts, it runs a program called BIOS. Okay, and BIOS stands for the basic, I didn't make up the name, input, output system. Okay, and BIOS does a bunch of stuff in the background every single time we turn on our PC. And if we understand a little bit about what BIOS does, it'll help us understand how to at least get to the beginning points of fixing a PC. Now, first of all, BIOS is on the motherboard. Okay, it's not something that we install. It comes pre-installed on the motherboard, and it's installed in ROM. What's ROM stand for? Anybody know? Any other guesses? It was in the reading. Not everyone read it, did we? It stands for, what's the R in for RAM?
Random.
Okay, it's not random. Okay, it's read-only memory. Okay, so ROM stands for read-only memory. It's permanent. Okay, it's in there. It's on this chip right there. It was programmed and written on that chip to stay for all time. Okay, so BIOS is on ROM and it doesn't change. It's a program that starts running when we start up our computer. Okay, so BIOS loads from ROM, and specifically the ROM is called CMOS ROM. Okay, and I want you to think of the C to stand for configuration. Okay, because it's loading the BIOS program that lets us change the configuration of the computer. It does not stand for configuration, by the way. Okay, it stands for I can't even remember, something metal oxide system. I had to Google it earlier. It stands for complementary metal oxide semiconductor. I'm never going to ask you that question. Okay? Never going to ask you that question. So it stands for complementary metal oxide semiconductor. It's called CMOS-ROM, and it's where BIOS lives. Okay, so BIOS loads from CMOS-ROM and starts to do some stuff. The first thing it does is it runs the post, or power on self-test. Before anything else happens, it runs a test of the computer to see if things are working the way they're supposed to. What are the three things, and I'm not including power in this question, what are the three things, because we already have to have power, it's not starting at all. What are the three things I have to have for a computer to work?
Power supply.
I'm not including power in this because I already said I got to have what?
CPU.
I got to have a CPU,
Motherboard.
I got to have a motherboard,
And memory.
and I got to have memory. Those are the only three things that I have to have. And if I don't have those three things, I don't get anything out of the computer. And I'm kind of lying to say that. Okay, so I'm going to take this PC right here. And by the way, the motherboard and the CPU work fine. If the motherboard and CPU don't work at all, I'm going to get nothing. Okay? Those two things don't work, I'm not going to get any of what I'm going to get right now. But if those two things do work, because they have to work for the post to work, okay, then I'm going to get something like this. The power on self-test has failed on this PC. And all PCs have a speaker on them. And that little tiny thing is a speaker, and that's what we're hearing right now. Okay? That beep sequence meant something. And if we had listened to it and counted out the beep codes, we would have known what it meant. But usually what the beeps mean is something's wrong with your memory. In this case, it's not in. Okay? But if the memory was bad, in which case this stick of memory is bad, and I'm going to put it in, and you're just going to have to believe me that it's in. Okay? I put that stick of memory in and turn on this PC. It's still beeping. Now the beeps aren't exactly the same.
So it's like Morse code.
Okay, yeah, exactly. It's like Morse code. And there's a place on the internet you can go and find out what those codes mean for different ones. But what you need to know is that usually those beeps mean something's wrong with my memory. Because if it was wrong with my CPU or my... I put a star next to memory and I haven't used it. If it was the CPU or the motherboard, I wouldn't get anything. Because it would never get far enough in the power on self-test to even check the memory. It would just fail. And you'd be like, nothing's happened. And one of the ways you can check to see if it's the memory or the motherboard and the CPU is if you take out the memory and you hear the beeps, it usually means the motherboard and the CPU are okay. It's something else. Because that's the first, it kind of goes like this. Well, I should have, is the motherboard okay? Is the CPU okay? And then it starts continuing on with other parts. And memory is where we start hearing beeps. If I unplug the hard drive, will it make beeps?
No.
I have the hard drive unplugged on this PC right now, and I'm putting in a good stick of RAM. By the way, this monitor doesn't work. I have it plugged in. Okay? When I turn this on, are there any beeps? No, because I don't need a hard drive for a computer to work. It can work without a hard drive. Could boot off a flash drive. That beep was it's trying to start the operating system, by the way. That's not a bad beep. It usually makes a lot more than one if it's bad. Okay, so I could run a whole computer off of a flash drive if I wanted to. I can run it off a CD-ROM if I want to, or I can run it off a hard drive. Has to have something to run, but it doesn't have to be a hard drive, so there's no reason to make a beep. It's going to look somewhere. By the way, that beep was, I can't find anything to start up from. And there's, if my monitor worked, it would say no operating system found. Okay, because it got done with BIOS and it tried to hand it off somewhere, and there was nowhere to hand it off to. Okay, and if I plug the hard drive back in, and I start up my PC, because the hard drive's working, it's going to have something to hand off to, and it's not going to make that one beep that it was an error. So I have this power on self-test that's going to go through and check out everybody. It checks out the components of the computer and reports back to BIOS who I found, okay, and what I found. Now, like I said, it doesn't have to have everything, so I could do a power on self-test. It may make a lot of noise. Noise is bad. When you guys get to your exam at the end of the year and you guys pull a system out and you get the one that starts beeping, you should go, I'm a winner, because you got the easiest one. It just told you I'm broken, okay? The other ones, when they go, you get one and you're like, oh man, I can't figure out what's wrong. The guy who got all the beeps is the guy everybody should go through. Man, you're so lucky, because everybody should know, go check your memory, dummy. And you should go, oh, it's not in. By the way, did you hear that one beep? No, it didn't make it, because I can hear the hard drive. It's loading the operating system for the hard drive. Okay, because everything started normal. But if you're the guy who got those beeps, and one or two of you will get that, all you have to do is go, oh, I got to check my memory. Oh, there's none in there. Or I put in memory that's bad. I keep bad memory. This is bad stick. It was in my drawer. I keep it so that when we go to the final exam, I can stick it in a computer so that it'll fail for you. So you have to figure out, there we go, there. We just got all the way booted up, even though I don't see anything because my monitor's gone screwy. So anyway, so I keep bad memory just so I can put it in PC so you can try to find out what's wrong. You saw it just made it. I mean, how hard was that? You guys all know that now. Makes a lot of noise. Now, it can boot up with bad memory without making noise, but that's really bad memory. It won't even boot to. Okay, so I run my power on self-test, and then BIOS continues loading. And it loads the configuration of this PC. Now, when I turn on the PC, initially this computer is like a person with amnesia. It's forgotten everything. It doesn't know who it is and what it's got in it. And the power on self-test says, okay, who's here? I don't remember. And it looks and sees what's there. Then it loads the configuration. That configuration, where was BIOS at? No, where was it at? Where was it saved at? In CMOS ROM. And the configuration is stored in CMOS RAM. Okay? What's the difference between RAM and ROM? RAM I can write to, ROM I can read from. Okay? It's read only where this was at, and now the configuration is stored in RAM. Okay? Because I can change it. I can change the configuration. There's some stuff that I'm going to change. But if RAM, we said last class, is volatile, it goes away, it needs power to be saved. How does it get saved on this motherboard? What holds the power on this motherboard?
Conductors.
Look at my motherboard. Tell me what's holding the power on my motherboard.
Battery.
That little battery right there. That's all that battery does. Okay, it doesn't power your PC. All it does, it's enough power to hold the information that you set in CMOS RAM. If I take this battery out, all of a sudden it's 1970. Okay, that's how it knows what today is. Because at one point, somebody put in the current date and time, and that battery right there is what keeps keeping track of time until it's dead.
So what happens when that battery dies?
Okay.
Is that why when it says low battery, that's what
That's
we
exactly what it is.
replace?
That is the low battery. And the reason it knows it's the low battery, because all of a sudden it says it's 1970. Well, it can't be 1970. There were no PCs in 1970. That's why the default date is before PC. It used to be when that PC right there. This one, the default date when the battery went out was 1970. Now they use 1990s because there was no Pentium 4s in 1990. They use some date that is impossible for this PC to have existed in. Some prior date. So it goes back, the computer turns on, it gets power, the clock starts up, and nothing told it what made it save the date, because that battery is dead, so all of a sudden it's so far back in time. Just 1990 doesn't seem that far back in time to me, but to you it may be. Okay? It's so far back in time that it's impossible, and it goes, oh, the battery must be dead, because I've forgotten what today is. So it says low battery. People go, oh, I need to fix the battery. You don't really have to, right? It says hit F1 to continue, and it just starts up, and who cares? Okay, because then the network tells it what the date and time is, and that's why the date and time is still right in the bottom right-hand corner, because my server said it's September 14th, dummy, not 1990. Okay? Yeah.
How would you change it if it does die? Without.
How do I change the battery? You got to open up the whole thing. You have to get a little tiny.
I know how you would change it, but like, how would you change it without it forgetting? Would you have to have it powered on?
No, you did that, and you forget about ever using this motherboard again. You have to have it completely powered off. You have to. This is worthless the way I'm holding it. So you have to have it completely powered off. One of the things we do when we shut down a PC, and before we get our hands in it, we'll talk about this in chapter 3. But the power's unplugged, and we hold down the power for 20 to 30 seconds, the power button, because when we hold down the power button, it's trying to turn on with the power unplugged, and it dissipates all the power that are in all these capacitors before we go inside the PC and touch something. Because there's enough power built up in these capacitors to fry this motherboard from us touching it. Okay? So, and even then, I try very hard not to touch it. I try to use, in fact, what I'll normally use is I'll use a plastic end cap to a pen because it's non-conductive instead of a screwdriver, and I'll pop it underneath there and pop that out, and then I just get a new battery, push it in there, pop it down without trying to touch the rest of the thing. Yes, it'll forget the date and time, it'll forget everything that's on there, but it already has because the battery's dead. Okay? Every single time it starts up, it says, crap, who am I? Because it's lost its memory. And so as soon as I put the battery in there, the next time it starts up with the new battery, it will remember. And we'll have to go into BIOS, which I'm going to show you in a second, and reset the date and time this time. Okay? So the configuration that we can change is saved by that battery right there. And if we've done something stupid, like let's say your little brother, I don't know if you have a little brother, your little brother went and put a password on the computer when it booted up. And he's forgotten it. And now no one can get into the computer because it says enter password, which you can do right at the BIOS screen. It's called a system password. If you do that, and it requires a system password, you're not totally hosed. Because if I take out the battery, it forgets everything, including the fact that you ever put a system password in. Okay? So, and it takes, I'll tell you, it takes a while. Usually if the system password is in there and it's a good battery, I have to take it out. Sometimes I have to leave it for 15 minutes before it's all dissipated and forgot everything. Then I put the battery back in, I start the computer back up, and it's dumb again and doesn't know there was ever a password. And we've had to do that before with systems that we get from the Air Force because they went and put passwords on it so nobody can use their classified system, and then we can't use it either. Okay? So, BIOS loads. I'm going to show you BIOS. It usually goes by so fast that we don't even see it. In fact, this one loads really, really fast, and it says hit F2 to enter setup, and I'm going to hit F2 right away. This is BIOS. They don't all look the same. In fact, they're all so different, it's ridiculous. You guys will go into the BIOS on every single computer in this district. Every single one. Okay? And you're going to go, crap, I've never seen this one before when you sit down at some of them. We were going to go into BIOS today on the laptops, but we ran out of time. So we'll do that next class. The reason there's so many different kinds is there's just like there's Microsoft and there's Mac and there's all these different companies that write BIOS. And they don't all, even the same company doesn't have the same BIOS. This is Dell BIOS right here. This is Dell BIOS right here. I wonder if I can get it up on this monitor. And I could show you that they look absolutely nothing alike, even though they're the same company's BIOS. Let's see if I can. Oh wait, I forgot that we aren't in BIOS right now. We're in Windows. I'll get in BIOS yet. Oh, I'm going to need a keyboard too. Okay, so that one's a Dell GX280, and this is a Dell GX240. We'll wait a second. I'll show you the differences between BIOS. They have the same. There's an article I added on here, by the way. If we look at our class. There are, this article 4, BIOS Explained, optional article. Don't have to read it. But it kind of talks about how all the BIOSes give you the same things, just different ways to get there, okay? I would recommend reading it, but not trying to commit that to memory. This BIOS step ones, however, that one is kind of a review of what we're talking about today, and that is definitely testable, that one. I put that on there because there was no reading to match it, but it goes through the steps of starting it. Okay, so we're down. I'm going to bring it up, show you that. Of course, it'll make a liar out of me, and it'll look exactly the same. FT. By the way, if you miss it, and see the startup screen looks exactly the same. It still said the same Dell startup screen, but the BIOS looks absolutely nothing like the other BIOS. Although they both say Dell Optiplex, this says Dell System, but they don't look anything alike. They have almost the same features though. You just have to go fishing sometimes, and you have to look for them. Okay, so I'm going to go through this one. So all these things are grayed out, and I apologize for not having it up here, but my long cable that I used to use to run from here to over there is in Mrs. Ald's ceiling, because she moved her desk and I only had one cable out, so I had to use mine. So unfortunately, you're going to have to look at it small. But all these are grayed out over here, meaning I can't make any changes. Some of these things are white, and some of them, let's see if I can go down to another screen. Yeah, there's nothing grayed out on this one. Let's see if I can go to another page. Okay, it's blue on this one if you can't change it, not gray. This one's gray if you can't change it. So here on the system info, it says it's the Dell GX280. It says the BIOS version came out in March 3rd of 2006. So the default date will be sometime before 2006 if I took the battery out. And that's how it would know it was bad. It tells me service tags. If I go down, it says it's a 3 gigahertz processor that has 1 meg of L2 cache. It tells me information about it, but I can't change it because it's not changeable stuff. Goes down here, tells me I've got 1.5 gigs of memory in here, and right now I got to something that's white. Here's where I can go in and set the date and the time. And if I set the date and the time and hit save, now it knows what the date and the time is. And it's not remembering this because it's plugged in. It's remembering it because of that battery. Now I will say, if it stays plugged in, it's using, the motherboard does get power even when this is off, but it's so minute amount of power, that's how it kind of overrides the battery if it can. So I can change that. The next thing down is the one that matters to us, that we're going to go in and check every single time we go to work on a computer, and that's the boot sequence. Because after it finishes loading, and it checks the configuration, the thing that it's checking, one of those things is checking is boot sequence. In other words, where do I go next? I'm almost done with using this hardware, and I'm going to hand off control to something. Who am I handing it off to? And in here, the boot sequences that are available are onboard USB, onboard hard drive, onboard network control, onboard USB floppy drive, onboard IDE device, and USB device. I'm going to go and turn on USB device. Oops. And I can change the order of those things. Okay? So now, when this system starts, the first thing it's going to do, it's going to look for a system on a USB drive. Okay, that's the first thing it's going to do. And if it doesn't find it on a USB drive, it's going to look on a CD-ROM drive. So it's going to go to here and see if there's anything that it can boot from on this disk, which, by the way, there is. And then it's going to go and look at the hard drive. The reason we're going to have to go into this when we go to work on PCs is if you're going to walk around with the CD-ROM and you don't check to see if the CD-ROM's before the hard drive, you got to wait for Windows to boot all the way up, and you got to shut it all the way down, and it's so much easier just to hit F2 and check it. So I'm going to save this. I'm going to stick it in my USB drive. Actually, I'm going to stick it in a different USB drive because this one's more fun. I haven't tried this one, so let's see if this one works. And I think this one has an operating system on it. And then I'm going to get out and I'm going to save it. And And you have to tell it to save. If you just leave, it's not gonna remember anything you just did. So I saved that configuration change I just made to the CMOS RAM. That's a test question, by the way. I will ask you, where are the configurations saved at? CMOS RAM. And it just booted from this, and it said I have to pick English, and I'm gonna boot to Ubuntu. Okay? Which is an operating system, just like Windows is an operating system. So it goes through and says, BIOS gets done doing its post-test, it loads the configuration to say what's next, and what's on and off, because I can turn off the video card, I can turn off the network card, I can turn on or off anything, I can turn off the hard drive if I want to, in the configuration and save it. And I have to turn it on too. So if I go to this one, and it says right now, primary drive on 0 is a hard drive, secondary drive 0 is a CD-ROM. If I go, and we saw that Windows is on there, if I go and turn that off and save changes, no matter what I do, Windows will not load because I just turned off the hard drive. Now it's not going to ever look at it again. So when this one's going to come up, because I just turned off the hard drive, and because there's no CD-ROM in there, it says strike F1 to retry boot, F1 to enter the setup utility. I can hit F1 all day because I turned off the hard drive, so there's nothing for it to boot from. So there's a lot of things that I can do in the configuration. So this one is coming up to Ubuntu, which I'm going to turn it off here.
It was already on it.
What?
Yeah, it was already on it.
And then it just,
Oh, okay. So that's Ubuntu.
what's that?
Okay, so it's a version of Ubuntu. It's a lightweight version of Ubuntu. I've got the Chromium web browser on there.
What is Ubuntu for?
Look, oh my goodness, it works just like a champ. Look at that. And I will tell you that there are versions of different operating systems that run way faster than Windows does. This one being one of them. Ubuntu is not even running on the hard drive, it's running off the flash drive right now. And this system probably will run way better than it did with Windows.
Then why don't we run everything off Windows?
Talk about that later.
Yeah, man.
There are reasons. Some of them are good reasons, some of them are not good reasons. We thought about making 210 a Ubuntu lab. Then we thought there would be people that were so confused that it would, it'd be if I only had my students using 210 and we put Ubuntu or Lubuntu or any of the other Linux operating systems on there, it would take me 10 minutes to show you how to use it, and you'd be like, okay. In fact, I might make a bunch of flash drives with it and let you guys play with it on your laptop so you can see what different versions of operating systems look like. But this one, this one's running just fine. I don't know what the news thing's actually we're not reading.
Can you run Office on Ubuntu and stuff like that?
It has, if I go to Office, it has a version of Office on there. It's not Microsoft Office because that only works on certain kinds of operating systems. But this is, it's called Abby Word, and it looks a lot like Microsoft Office. It comes with, other versions come with OpenOffice. If you had a computer at home, for instance, that the hard drive screwed up, it's an old Pentium 3 maybe that ran good at one time, but now it runs like a pig. If you took Ubuntu and threw Ubuntu on there, you'd be like, oh my gosh, it's like a whole new computer. And it would run way faster, and it comes with Office and everything you would ever want already pre-installed for free. Okay, so yes, there are some great things. So the boot sequence then looks for the boot, and it hands off to the OS, and that's what we're talking about, so I'll go ahead and move on. It hands off to the operating system. Okay, and there are really 3 different, I'm going to say makers, but that's a bad word, makers of operating system. Name one of them.
Mac.
Okay, Apple, which is the company, or Macintosh is, why I made a B, I'm not sure. Let's try that again. Okay, or Mac OS. Okay, there's all kind of Macintosh operating systems. What's the other one?
Microsoft.
Okay, Microsoft. Or Windows operating systems. And there's a bunch of those that we've gone through. Windows has gone through so many different permutations, it's crazy. The last one you guys might know about, might not know about, is called Linux. Okay? This is a version of Linux. Okay, and we'll get to Linux here. Maybe not today. We're going to kind of go through some of these. So Apple was the first one who gave us the what?
iPod.
Yes, but that's not. We're talking about computers. Okay, so back in time, maybe before you guys were born, I don't know. We got this magical device. I'm gonna unplug this. But yes, the magical device called the mouse. Okay, and Mac gave us the mouse. We did not have a mouse before Macintosh. We love Macintosh for bringing us the wonderful world of the mouse. Okay, and there are a whole bunch of Mac OSs that have come out, and I cannot tell you what they're all named because I'm not a Mac aficionado. Okay. Windows, however, we can go through some of those because I've lived through all the Windows operating systems. The first one was called DOS, or Disk Operating System. That's what that PC right there ran off of. There was no mouse. There was only a keyboard, and it was ugly, and I won't make you go to it. But if you want to see what DOS looks like, if you ever go to Run and type in the word CMD, there you go. There's DOS. Okay? And you can type C:, go back to your C drive, and dir for directory to see what's on there. And you can change directories by putting CD. And anyways, that's how you use DOS. You had to know the DOS commands. There was no help other than some places had a little poster on the wall that had common DOS commands. So you went over there and, okay, that's how I opened that up. Okay, and I used a program called PC Write. It's just wonderful editing program. No spelling checker, there's no such thing. But you could change words on it. No mouse. Anyway, so that was DOS, and that's what DOS looks like. And then we got Windows. Our first version of Windows was called Windows 3.1. Where did Windows 1 and 2 go? I have no idea. But we started with Windows 3.1, and we got the mouse with Windows 3.1. You can only open up one thing at a time. I don't know if that was the point one was for. So if you had Word open and you wanted to use your calculator, you had to close Word to open your calculator. Okay, Word did not keep going if you wanted to open your calculator. If you wanted to open up the directory to open up a Word, you could. Two things didn't happen. There was no multi-threading like we have now. Two things did not happen at one time with that. And then we got Windows, anybody guess?
4.
95. And then we got Windows 98. And then we got 98 second edition. And then we got ME, which stood for Millennium, which is not the same as Windows 2000, which was a big pile of dog doo. Okay? And at the same time, they were developing another one called Windows NT, which stood for Next Technology. Okay, and then from Windows NT we got Windows 2000, and then we got Windows XP, and somewhere in there we got Windows 2003 Server, and then we got Vista, and then we got 2008, and then we got 7, and that's the server. By the way, you've never seen 2003 and 2008; those are server editions only. And now we got Windows 7, and Vista was the poop version of that thing over there. Okay. So we've got all these different versions of Windows. Of them, right now, people are still using XP and 7. Okay? What's the purpose of an operating system? What is the purpose? What does it do for us?
Start your computer.
Okay, it lets us use the PC. Okay, its primary purpose is to use the PC and get to other programs. Okay?
Was Windows its own program at one time?
It is still its own program. I mean, it is a program that loads when I load the computer. It has other stuff embedded, other programs embedded into it, like the calculator and FreeCell and Solitaire, but those are still just programs inside of the Windows operating system. Okay? So the purpose of operating systems is to get the programs. What's the difference between XP and 7 as far as that purpose goes? When you guys are in Lab 210 and you're using a Windows XP machine, and you're in Lab 209 using a Windows 7 machine, do they serve a different purpose between those two rooms? No, it's always just to get to Office, you know? You just want to get to Office, or I want to get to the internet, I want to get to a program. So why would I go to Windows 7 over Windows XP? What would be my reason to do that?
Run faster, maybe. Yeah, better.
I would conjecture that it's so much slower, it's ridiculous. Okay? My point is, there is no reason. If all my programs work on XP, what do I get out of 7? I'll tell you what I get. I get pretty. It's pretty. Anybody got Windows 7 at home? You got the Arrow browser stuff. When I go like this, oh my goodness, I can see through that as I move it on a Windows XP machine, right? It goes opaque as I'm moving Windows on Windows 7. You ever notice that? You can see through the top there. Does that make it more usable for me?
No.
What does that do for me? On those machines over there, on these machines in 209, in order to make Windows 7 work, I had to turn off all those cool things. I had to turn off all the pretty to make it work. Okay? So, am I against Windows 7? Absolutely not. My computer at home is Windows 7, but I have a quad-core machine with 8 gigabytes of RAM, and I'm running Windows 7 64-bit. I have a really nice machine at home. And if you can't afford a really nice machine, Windows 7 just bogs you down for no reason at all, because the point of the operating system is to get to the programs. If I can get to the programs on Ubuntu, or I can get to the programs on Windows XP, and one runs better than the other, why does it matter which one I run? Well, in the case of that question, Ubuntu doesn't run everything that Windows does. But the difference between XP and 7 is slower, it uses more. I said the other day when we were talking about RAM, in order to have Windows 7 run well, you want 2 gig of RAM. And in order for XP to run well, you want 1 gig of RAM. Well, I just said you have to have twice as much memory to get the same performance. Yeah.
What's the difference between 34-bit and 62? Or
That is a question for chapter 4.
Come on, Cody.
We will talk about 32 and 64-bit, but we're way off track talking about it today. And we're already going to not make it through everything I want to get to. Okay, so the purpose of the operating system is to get us to the rest of the stuff on our computer. It's to make it so I can open iTunes. Can I open iTunes on XP and Windows 7? Yes. XP is going away. They're ending support on XP. Are we going to have to move to Windows 7 someday? Yes. But it's expensive. Even at our volume discount. It's $55 a PC. I have 750 PCs. Let's do the math, shall we? How much will that cost, Mr. Poole, to go 55 times 750 equals, I didn't do times, I did minus. Let's try to 750, where's the times button?
Oh.
Isn't that it right there?
Yeah, right there.
You clicked the one right below.
Oh, did I? $41,000.
that is extremely.
That's a chunk of change for me. That's twice my annual tech budget.
There's your ink.
Okay, what?
I said there's your ink.
Yeah, there's my ink. There you go. So is there a reason for me to go to Windows 7? No, I'm not Oakwood. We are not a wealthy district. We don't do it for no reason. I try very hard to analyze everything before I make a decision. That's why we put a Windows 7 lab in. Just to see, did it make anything way better? No. The computers run slower than they did when they were on Windows XP. I'm not going to take it off now. I just installed it on 30 machines. So we'll continue this discussion next
How
class.
long would it take to put Windows 7 on every computer?
Well, that's another